Hey everybody, I'm Jay Scherr with Jay Scherr Business Consulting. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, and other leaders maximize their potential, build rock-solid foundations for their businesses, and create more freedom in their lives. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Tony Robbins said, "It is in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped." Well, on today's episode, we're going to explore how we make decisions. Hint, it's not with our conscious minds. Why the traditional marketing model is dead. What kind of messages create the most positive associations and cause buyers to choose you over the competition, and more. My guest is a wife and mom of 2 boys. She's a trailblazing, award-winning marketer and behavioral expert, TEDx speaker, author, and the foremost authority in harnessing the instinctive mind to accelerate brand and business growth. She earned degrees in economics and art history from Yale and an MBA from Harvard Business School. She's the recipient of the Congressional Women of Distinction and the Ogilvy Award. Her list of clients includes well-known brands such as McDonald's, Kraft Foods, PepsiCo, DirecTV, and Johnson & Johnson, and she's been featured in Barron's, Harvard Business Review, Scientific American, Forbes, NPR, and other media outlets. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Triggers and the woman who's teaching all of us the new rules of persuasion in business and life, Leslie Zane. Leslie, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. I have to take you with me from now on to do that intro everywhere.
I will squeeze into
I'm
whatever
blushing.
size
I'm
suitcase
blushing.
you have.
I'm blushing. Thank you so much. Very sweet.
Absolutely. I am so excited about our conversation today. This is going to be a great one. So I thought a good starting point, Leslie, would be for you to share with all of us what your favorite thing is about yourself and why that particular thing.
Oh, I can give you a long list of things I don't like, but you want something
Ooh,
I like.
let's stay positive.
Let's see. I would say the thing that I'm most known for is being very persistent. I don't give up. You might think that this book came easily, but I wrote another book before this one that was not that never went anywhere. And so I actually needed to start from scratch to come out with this one, which hopefully everybody likes, but we've been getting a lot of good feedback. And I think it's just a testimony to pretty much my personality. I don't give up easy. I don't take no for an answer. I keep trying to get it right, trying to improve in everything that I do. So that's probably the thing that's best.
What a great trait to have. So let me ask you something. If we were to take the other side of the coin of persistence, so you've talked about the positive aspects of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you just keep going. You don't take no, you try to figure it out. Has there been a point in time throughout your life where that persistence has hurt you in any way?
I would say that when I was younger and my ideas were very different from the traditional approach to marketing, they were considered very unconventional, maybe even heresy in some ways. Those years were tough because I was young, I was brazen, and I didn't always know how to present my very different ideas in the right way. I needed my book. I needed another 25 years to learn how to, work with those situations and kind of overcome resistance. But yeah, there's definitely a negative flip side to that persistence and that passion about what you do. I think overall it's been mostly positive, but I would say with age has come the wisdom of knowing how to be, more collaborative and get people to, listen to my ideas in a more open-minded way.
Beautifully said. And it's amazing how we have to go through those experiences and listen and learn through those to be able to hopefully reach a point of turning that into wisdom. So thank you for sharing that. And I know we're going to delve a bit deeper into part of that story because it really talks about your evolution from where you were to where you are today. But before we get there, I wanted to go back in time a bit. I have found just through my own personal experience, through my own clients, through all of the interviews that I've done with amazing people just like you, that there are experiences that we have early in life that really can shape who we are, that can change the trajectory of our lives. What is one such experience for you that really shaped who you are as a person?
I have one from a personal standpoint and one business one.
Okay.
So my personal one is that I was 17 years old and I was a very good student, but I wasn't the best test taker. And so I remember my SAT scores were not as high as we would have wanted them to be. And my college advisor, whose name, believe it or not, was Miss Pitts, yes, her name was Miss Pitts, said, Leslie, don't bother applying to any Ivy League schools because you're not going to get into one.
Ooh.
And I sort of listened to what she said, but I heard it, but I didn't listen to it. And I said, that's okay, Miss Pitts. I'm going to try anyway. And so, little Leslie at the age of 17 basically applied to, all of the Ivy League schools. And little Leslie got into all of the Ivy League schools except for one. And I believed in myself, and I wasn't going to take her definition of success as my own. I absolutely think that shaped who I am because I saw that I don't need to take no for an answer. I need to be persistent, and if I work hard, and I remember working very hard on my applications, that I could succeed and overcome whatever doubts somebody had about me.
That's amazing. Now, before you go to the business example, did you go back and have a conversation with Mrs. Pitts about what you ended up accomplishing so she would know that when advising future students that maybe a different approach would be better?
I did not do that. It's a good point. Maybe today I would, have more more confidence to go ahead and do that. But I did not do that at the time. Okay. I was just happy to have my little acceptance letters, which, by the way, at that time still came in a mailbox, and you knew whether you had gotten in by whether it was a fat envelope or a thin envelope.
Absolutely. I love that. So share with us the business example.
So the business one was when I was working on the Johnson's baby business, and I talk about this in the book. When the business was not doing very well, it was losing market share to private label and to some other smaller brands. And I remember noticing that even though we only had moms and babies in all of our advertising, I had noticed that dads were getting more involved in caregiving. They were taking their kids to the soccer field and they were changing diapers. And I remember marching into my boss's office and with great confidence and that great brazen, youthful spirit that I had at that time, saying, I know what we need to do to turn around the Johnson's baby business. We need to put the first father in a Johnson's baby TV ad. And he said, you're crazy. It's moms that buy these products, not dads, and there's no data to support anything that you're saying. But again, I did not give up. I kept advocating for this, and then came my performance review. And I remember that to this day. Leslie is too passionate about putting fathers in advertising, and this is an executional concern, not a strategic one. Well, this was like a knife in my heart because I had been told at Bain and Company and other places I had worked that I was very strategic. I was very upset, but I still didn't give up. And I think they finally gave in out of just sheer exhaustion. They put the first father in a Johnson's Baby TV ad. It literally, like the business turned around practically instantaneously. It was the highest scoring commercial in the company's history. Products started flying off the shelves. And this was a really important moment for my overall career because what I saw was that there are these things that happen at an instinctive level that nobody's monitoring, that nobody has any data to measure. But they are really, really powerful. And if you can find them, essentially I had found my first trigger, dad with baby as opposed to mom with baby was a trigger. Mom with baby wasn't. Dad with baby was. And I knew that I had found something really powerful. And then I basically named my company by that name, Triggers Brand Consulting. And I've been sort of approaching the world of marketing with that same lens, the importance of the instinctive mind ever since that day.
That is so good. So I'm going to play what if for a moment, which I typically don't do, but I'm going to based on what you just shared in this story. So let's say the roles were reversed and you had been your boss at Johnson's and was having that same conversation with a marketing person who came in with a radically different idea. Do you think we can't go off of what you know today, right? But at that moment in time, do you think you would have said yes to the idea without challenging it?
It's a really good question. I'd love to say that I am I try to be a very open-minded leader, and I feel like we are always trying new things. And I'm huge into experimentation and not assuming that I know everything, because I don't know everything. So we use a lot of research at my company. We're just conducting that research at an instinctive level. That's the difference. So I think maybe I would have tried to validate what this person was recommending to me through some kind of research. I don't think I would have dismissed it out of hand because I've always presumed that I don't know. And I certainly don't ever presume that I know what the consumers are going to do because consumers, they surprise me all the time to this day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. It's always interesting to be able to look back and gain, because now you have the benefit of time, experience, perspective. But I always try to think of, even through my own career, looking back at conversations that I had that now I would have had the conversation differently
100%.
Just because I've grown in my own leadership. Yes. Of course, I'm a work in progress, but I've made lots of mistakes, and I want to make sure that I'm always learning from those so I can pull those lessons forward. So speaking of lessons, I in researching you and doing my due diligence, I had read that your mother was a Holocaust survivor. And I would love to find out from you what one of the most valuable lessons was that you learned from your mom early in life that you still carry with you today. And I'm going to ask the exact same question in regards to your dad.
Oh, boy. Wow. I would say that the fact that my mother is a Holocaust survivor is in my DNA. I am extremely aware of it. I'm aware of it every day. I'm certainly aware of it very much now in these times. My parents, both of them, but particularly my mother, because she traveled to this country during the Holocaust. And what you don't know, unless you are really an amazing sleuth of the Sherlock Holmes variety, is that my mother's ship on her way to the United States at the age of 7 was torpedoed by a German submarine, and it sank. And my mother, at the age of 7, with her sister and her mother and father, were in a lifeboat for 8 days and 8 nights without food or water. And they almost perished. And it was lucky because it was June, and so they didn't freeze, during the night. But on the 8th night, they were picked up by a Finnish boat that rescued the family, who they stayed in touch with for the rest of their lives and became like family with. What did I learn from my mother? I absolutely learned persistence. My mother came to this country at the age of 7. They stuck her in kindergarten because she couldn't speak the language. But my mother was very smart, and she had been a very good student in Antwerp, Belgium. And so after a few weeks, when they saw that she could do long division and she was in kindergarten, they jumped her up 2 more grades, and she ultimately became the valedictorian of her high school in Forest Hills High School in Queens. I think I've learned persistence. I've learned to challenge authority, to question authority, not be afraid. There's probably a lot more than that, but those are the first things that come to mind.
Beautiful. And then how about your father?
My father unfortunately passed away in 2015. My mother's still alive, thank God. My father was my biggest champion. He, in his eyes, I could do nothing wrong. When my mother was getting too specific about asking me too many questions, he would say in French, because my father was French and my mother is Belgian, he would say, laisse-la, which means leave her alone. Leave her alone already. And so he was just my protector, my biggest fan. He was an incredibly non-judgmental person. Very, very open-minded. So I think I learned some of those traits from him.
That is amazing. So both of your parents, so your father passed in 2015. So both of your parents were able to have seen you blossom and grow and create all the magnificent things that you've been able to create throughout this life. What a gift. What a gift.
For me, the gift was that I had them in my life for a very long time, and they always believed in me. And I think, they were amazing parents. And the book actually has a dedication to my parents in the very beginning, and I talk a little bit about both of them also in the back of the book in the acknowledgments.
Absolutely. So for all of you that are watching and listening right now, you've already heard Leslie reference this twice, right? We're going to be digging into more details here, but what she's talking about is the power of instinct. And this is a book that I highly, highly recommend. Obviously, we're going to provide links to this in the show notes. But as we're talking about this book, I would encourage all of you to make sure that you are clicking on that link and make a purchase today. Whether you own a business, whether you're in the business of branding, keep in mind that you are a brand yourself. And this book is going to help you in so many different ways. There's great strategies, tactics, information that you're going to be able to apply every single day. So Leslie, we'll continue the conversation here, but I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that early on. So let's start here when it comes to the work that you do and all the research that you've done. First, share with all of us why instinct is so powerful.
If anyone has ever tried to convince somebody to do something, whether it's buy a brand, buy their services, even, go to the restaurant that you want to go to, or get your child into college. I mean, there's so many different things that we try to do in life. We all know how difficult those things can be. And it turns out that the conscious mind is really what's standing in the way. The conscious mind sees you coming. It's skeptical. It's resistant to change. It doesn't want to do what you want it to do. And it's, by the way, it's conscious. It's conscious that you're trying to sell it. And so it turns out that most of us we're spending a lot of time, energy, and resources trying to convince this conscious mind that doesn't want to be convinced. The unconscious mind, because we have these two mechanisms in our minds, and as it turns out, only 5% of the decisions we make are made with the conscious mind, and a vast 95% are made with our unconscious mind. But nobody really thinks about that, so they're just very focused on persuasion. And we have all manner of technique that we use. We barrage people with messages. We give them coupons and discounts. Essentially, we're trying to throttle people into buying what we're selling. And we're kind of going about it all wrong, because the conscious mind does make up only 5% of the decisions we make anyway. So why are we spending 100% of our time, energy, and resources on only 5% of our decisions? And because of the resistance of the conscious mind, it's a really long road to achieving your results. What we do at Triggers is we bypass the conscious mind altogether. We help our clients bypass the conscious mind to reach people's brand decisions, business decisions, any really decision that they're trying to have people make through the instinctive mind. So bypass the conscious mind, get to people's instincts, and it turns out that part of the mind is much more malleable, and you can make change behavior, change instincts, change preferences much more easily going through the unconscious mind. That's what this entire approach is about. It's empowering you to make change faster in everything that you do in your life, business, personal life, personal brand, whatever it is you're trying to grow. You can do it faster if you go through the unconscious mind, because it is more malleable, and that's where decisions are made anyway.
So this is so fascinating. And as you and I were talking before we started recording, and I had mentioned to you after I read your book that it really had me asking more important questions to myself and really doing some self-reflection, right? And I fully realized that there are so many things that I've been doing wrong for so many years. And often I thought that I was having some success, right? We have to define for ourselves what success means. But I was often doing the same things over and over again, right? Telling emotional stories or using messaging that I thought was what the best marketers were doing. But I really was not tapping into the most important aspect of who we are, our unconscious mind. And all of you right now that are listening and watching us, I want you to visualize for a moment the iceberg, right? You've all seen the image before where the part that's sticking out of the water is only a small percentage of the entire iceberg. So if you think about the part below the water, right, which is the largest mass, that would be the 95%, if you will, that Leslie just mentioned, that really is what is being used to make our decisions. So am I saying that correctly, Leslie? If not, please push back.
No, you got it 100% right. It sounds like you memorized my book, because that's exactly right. I love it. And what I'd love to just explain to the viewers is, like, all of marketing has been built in many ways on the myth that the conscious mind makes the decisions. So if you think about it, like, marketing's been around a very long time. We've been doing this for a while, right? And what we're all trying to do is persuade this conscious mind to do what we want it to do, and it doesn't work very well. And we're like, wait, why isn't this working? Well, it's not working because we're not even targeting the right part of the mind. And all of the rules that marketers created, because this goes back a long time, the days of David Ogilvy and the days of the book, the Trout and Rees book on positioning. There are kernels of all of this that are true, but then there's a lot that we that we assumed based on the assumption that the conscious mind is making the decisions. We have a set of rules in marketing, there's probably 50 of them, that were all created for the conscious mind, for the way the conscious mind works. And what I'm saying is, hey guys, it's actually the instinctive mind that calls the shots. So we need a new set of rules. We need a new playbook, because that is, now we know, and it, kind of started maybe in the 2000s, and then Daniel Kahneman came along with Thinking Fast and Slow and Predictably Irrational, and you have like a bunch of books, and a bunch of different scientists, and behavioral science starts to take hold. So you have some things that are changing in the marketplace where people are starting to understand that it really is the unconscious mind that matters. But nobody has gone back to change the marketing rules to fit that new understanding that we have, that it is the unconscious mind that's calling the shots. So that's essentially what my book is. It's honestly like a bit of I don't want to say it in a nice way, a takedown of the existing rules of marketing, which I have found to hold companies back. It actually, if you follow those rules to the letter, you will shrink your business. And what we need is this new set of rules customized for how the brain actually works instinctively. And then you see that business picks up, because now you're working with the unconscious mind instead of working against it.
Yeah, this really is so amazing. And now for those in the audience, Leslie, who are marketers, who own marketing agencies, and they're branding experts, who are listening to this right now, who may not have read your book yet, although I know they will. But for those who are listening to this and thinking to themselves, now wait a minute, David Ogilvy, you're telling me that, all of that success and long history in marketing, you're telling me that I've been doing things wrong all this time? How could that possibly be? Because you didn't say, right, you didn't put everything in a bucket and say everything is being done wrong. You said there are some aspects.
Right. It's not everything. There's some things that we do very right, but there are some fundamental rules. I'll just give you an example of one.
Okay.
The idea that uniqueness is the road to salvation, right? Differentiate or die. Be the purple cow. Stand out. This is like one of the basic principles of marketing. I mean, even my children know this. Like when they ran for president of the student council in school, they were like, Mom, help me create a poster that's really going to stand out. I need to be different from the other guys, right? I need to be different from the other candidates. It's like baked in that's how we operate. But wait a minute, the human brain is hardwired to connect with the familiar, not with the unique. So what are we doing here? We're actually fighting the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind loves the familiar. If you take a baby out of its mother's arms, it's going to scream because the baby only knows its mother's face, not your strange face. And during the pandemic, what happened? Everybody went for the brands that they know. It was all the no-name brands that were left on the shelves because that gave us comfort and security. That's what we instinctively wanted at that time.
So I want to interrupt you for just a moment. I just want to hit a pause on this because you just said something that created a visual that I know everyone heard, and I want you to think about this because for all of you, I do it. We go to the store, right? We go to our favorite electronics store, the grocery store, whatever, and we automatically reach for the thing, the product, whether it's a Mac, whether it's a certain type of toilet paper or a certain type of cereal. We don't even think about it, right? It just naturally happens. And I look at my shopping cart after I go to the grocery store upon checking out, and half the time I'm like, how did I even choose all of these particular items, right? Because we're not, it's a reaction because it's something that we've done over and over again. And I don't want to miss that point, Leslie, because you brought it up, but it speaks to the familiar and how important that is and how we're making connections in our brain. So go just a little bit deeper on that, if you will.
Yeah. So two things. First of all, I love that you brought us to the supermarket because it's just the simplest way to understand this, even though it applies to everything from a doctor prescribing a medication to somebody choosing who they're going to use as their financial advisor. Like literally, it's all the same. But let's do the supermarket just because it is an easy visual. When you go into the supermarket, you are on autopilot. You just reach. So whether it's Pepsi versus Coke or, Essentia versus Gatorade, you are just on autopilot, almost like my colleague Morgan Seamark, he calls it sleep shopping. You might as well be sleep shopping. And if your brain did not have the ability to make those snap judgments in a giant supermarket with thousands of SKUs, you'd literally be in the supermarket for 3 weeks. But you have the ability, your brain has the ability to just reach and find those go-to items. And it turns out that go-to choice that you're making over and over again is driven by your instinctive mind. And we'll get into exactly what drives that a little bit later on. But that is what we mean by people being on autopilot and making instinctive decisions. We call that instinctive brand preference. I don't call it loyalty. I don't believe in loyalty. I think loyalty, again, is one of those conscious concepts, kind of like uniqueness, that kind of takes you down the wrong road. There's no conscious devotion to brands, and I'm not even sure the Net Promoter Score is necessarily correlated to business growth. I've seen many studies that show it's not. Okay. What's really going on here is instinctive brand preference. You instinctively prefer one brand over another, and this lives in your unconscious mind. Again, we'll explain exactly where that comes from a little bit later. But that's what we mean by instinct. So if you can get into that glorified space of being the instinctively preferred brand, it means you don't have to promote. You don't have to give coupons. You don't have to give discounts. That's where you want to be, that you have so much instinctive preference at the unconscious level that you don't need to do some of those traditional marketing techniques. By the way, those are only going to give you a fleeting bump anyway. Give somebody a coupon, give them a big discount. Sure, they'll buy you once, but it's not going to be an instinctive, flywheel, which is what we're really trying to get to here.
This is so good. I love this. So I'd like to go back to the story you told about Johnson's and the baby business, right? And your idea at that time, which once they applied that, right, it made a tremendous difference and a shift in that business itself. So can you apply what you're doing today, your research, what you've learned, to what actually was happening at a scientific level and at a brand connectome? And I maybe I'm a little early in mentioning that, but I think it's important that we go there, right? What was actually happening with that when you said dad, baby?
Right. So dad and baby is what we call a growth trigger, or an image trigger, we could also call it. Okay. Triggers are succinct codes or cues in any of the 5 senses that when you use them, they create an avalanche of positive associations in the mind. So dad with baby equals, in our mind, no one needs to say these things because they're already baked into your brain, your memory. Progressive, the dad is giving a mom a break. Oh my God, that's so tender to see that strong male body against that innocent little life. Wow, he's pretty cute. I wouldn't mind knowing him. Right, there are a lot of things that worked for mom that made that a really interesting way to bring a progressive, up-to-date twist on the familiar. That's essentially what it was. It was a creative twist on something familiar. Mom and baby is done all day long. It had become wallpaper in the marketplace. But dad with baby, and by the way, they were the first to put a dad with a baby in a Johnson's ad, in any ad actually, with a baby. That created all these new positive associations about the company that it didn't have before, and sort of created this connection with mom that was much deeper than had they just shown yet another, mom, Madonna and child kind of pose. So that's what was happening. And then I can explain, once we define Brand Connectome, what's happening to the Brand Connectome, because that's really important too.
Yeah, please do that. And I just want to point out to everybody right now, I really hope you are paying close attention to what Leslie just explained, right? Taking that real world example, because this is an area that for you and for what you're doing, for your own personal branding, for your business in any area, right? This is what is going to make a significant difference. And so I always, after, of course, reading the book, I started asking myself, okay, well, what are the positive associations and then what are the negative associations, right? So I know Leslie's going to speak to that, but yes, please talk about what the Brand Connectome is, because this is a word that most people will not have heard unless they're familiar with your work.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start with the human connectome. Our brain is a wiring map. It's a map of interconnected wires, and those wires kind of help us make connections in our brain. Our brain is an analogic machine. It's constantly making connections. If I say hot dog, you say mustard. If I say hamburger, maybe you say McDonald's, right? Like, we're constantly making connections and constantly making associations. So the Brand Connectome, and there's a symbolic three-dimensional version of the Brand Connectome right behind me, if your audience can see that. That is a central node. That's the brand. And all these neural pathways that have gotten sort of glued to the brand over time in people's minds, all of the memories accumulated in people's minds. And if it's a brand that's been around a long time, like a Pepsi or a McDonald's or a MetLife, these are brands that have been around a very long time. Your associations and your memories with that brand could go back all the way to childhood. So what we're trying to do in the world of brands is to have a large Brand Connectome. There's actually three things that make a healthy Brand Connectome. It needs to be large, number one. Number two, it needs to be positive, meaning lots of positive associations. And number three, it needs to be distinctive. I didn't say unique. I said distinctive. And we can define the difference between uniqueness and distinctiveness if you want to come back to that later. But the three big rules of Brand Connectome health, or healthy branding, or just healthy brands, forget about branding, because then people think about pretty pictures. But I'm talking about what makes a healthy brand: large, positive, and distinctive. So this is how I'd like everybody to think about this.
Okay.
I'm launching a new brand. My brand is a seed. I plant the seed in other people's minds, and I am going to feed it with nutrients. What am I going to feed it? I want to feed it lots of positive associations. As the brand takes on these new positive associations, which are going to get sort of glued to it on these neural pathways, the brand is going to expand in people's minds. That seed is going to grow into a seedling. The seedling is going to grow into a plant. And if I do my job right as a gardener, because the marketer is a gardener, then the seed is going to grow into a full-grown tree. And by the time it reaches tree status, with lots of roots and lots of branches, it's going to cover more of my brain terrain. It's going to just have more connections in the mind. So the key thing, that first criteria of large, is driven by the number of connections that the brand has in people's minds, not about itself necessarily, but about how it connects to my life, to their lives, to your customers' lives. So one, large. Two, positive. if negative associations get into the connectome, and they do come in, just like a virus, they kind of infiltrate your brand without your knowing it, those negative associations hold back growth. So a lot of our work is with legacy brands that have been around a long time that have accumulated negative associations because nobody's been monitoring the unconscious mind. And it doesn't show up in traditional research. And so what we're trying to find out for our clients, and you can do this work on your own for your own brand and your own business, is what are the positive associations that people have about my brand, and what are the negative associations that people have about my brand. And for sure, the people who aren't using you, who are aware of you, they have negative associations. Otherwise, by definition, they'd be using you. So if they're aware,
Leslie,
yeah.
Could you give us an example of a legacy brand that either you've worked with or have studied that has or had a negative association, just so we can see the picture in our mind of what that is?
Absolutely. So maybe about, I don't know, 8 to 10 years ago now, McDonald's was suffering from these videos that had gone viral saying that they have pink slime in their chicken nuggets and, horses' eyeballs in their beef. None of this was true. It was all a myth. But these awful videos had gone out there. McDonald's food has tremendous integrity, but they were suffering from these videos that had been seen by like 50 million people. They had gone viral. And so that's a really good example of negative associations had gotten into the minds of, in some cases, even the people that they used, people who were users, as well as people who were competitive users. They were all suffering from these negative associations, and that was making the brand decline. But they did a wonderful job of finally telling the real story of their food. I mean, they have agreements with sustainable farms and family farms, and they use USDA 100% beef and free range chicken. They do all the right things, all the good things. They just weren't getting credit for it in the marketplace. And these videos had created all these negative associations that they just weren't monitoring until it hit the business. And what you want to do is you want to get ahead of those negative associations, because negative associations hold back growth. There's a direct correlation to the negative associations that are in your connectome and growth. Why? Because where's growth going to come from? Growth has to come from new users, either competitive users or non-users. Most of the time, honestly, comes from competitive users. If competitive users have negative associations that have been unaddressed for a long time, those turn into barriers. We call them implicit barriers. So I don't care if you spend $100 million on advertising, if your target has implicit barriers up, and a lot of them, they're not coming over and they're not going to convert, and your marketing money is kind of being wasted. So it's super helpful to understand the negative associations that your growth target has, the people you're trying to get, because you want to create communications that take down those negative associations, and then suddenly the brand, picks up and business picks up.
So this makes so much sense. So you and your team will spend time to really pull back the layers of a brand, legacy brand or not, to really look at and explore where those positive and negative associations are, and work to either replace the negative ones with a positive one or grow the number of positive associations so they overtake the negative associations. Is that, I'm simplifying it, but is that...
You are so 100% right. And what's the one thing we never want to do? We never want to tell somebody, no, I don't have that negative association. Because as soon as I do that, I'm literally telling more people about the negative association, and I'm reinforcing it.
Okay.
So for sure, what you just said is either displace a negative with a positive in almost a surgical way. and or just create so many and such an abundance of positive association that it just drowns out the negatives.
So let's get tactical here for a moment. For those that are listening and watching us right now, Leslie, if they own a business and they want to explore this more deeply, what would be a good starting point for them to try to find out what the positive associations are with their brand and their business? And if there are negative associations, how do they discover them, find them? Who are they talking to? Obviously, they can call you, right? And read your book. What would you recommend for them as a good starting point?
So I think that companies tend to spend a lot of time with their existing customers, and that's useful to some extent. They're probably going to love you. And it's useful to know what your current customers, what the positive associations are that your current customers have about you. But you're never going to find out what your negative associations are from them. I'd be surprised if you learned that. And I'd certainly be surprised if they were open enough to share those with you. So you have to go outside your organization, go outside your franchise, your customer franchise, to people who don't use you. So I would sort of try to conduct some research with people who don't use you but are aware of you. We call them aware non-triers.
Okay.
Or aware competitive users, and try to get them to share with you some of the positive and negative associations about your company. You will be surprised to learn what those negative associations are. The brain, I'm going to refer to this in a funny way, but it's essentially the brain kind of misfires, and it makes up a story about your brand very often that you don't want it to have. Right? The brain connects the dots, and it's usually because it's making assumptions, and it's also usually because you're not creating a strong enough narrative about your own company. And so people are taking away something else and creating a new connection, but that connection is actually creating competitive disadvantage for you.
This is so interesting. Is there anything that you would hear today about a brand that you're working with? Is there anything that you would hear today that would surprise you after all the years that you've been doing this and the experience that you have? Does anything just shock you or surprise you?
I obviously can't speak about my clients or my current clients, but what I can say is that we're always surprised. There's some connection that the brain makes about a client's brand that it's like, where did they get that from? Right? Like it's that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so it's a level of nuance, and it's really important to know, because that knowledge gives you freedom. I would say that most marketing today is still sort of, let's be honest, we try lots of different things. And in many cases, we're testing strategy through creative instead of knowing a really precise strategy that solves the problem and then creating multiple creative executions off of that strategy. And that just comes from lack of knowledge. I would say if you're not developing your strategy to take down barriers that your growth target has, then your strategy is not going to be effective. That's the game. You have to take down those barriers. Otherwise, the business isn't going to come in.
Wow. This is really such an eye-opener. And as I mentioned to you when I was reading your book, so many different areas that I was thinking about and underlining and really going back to my own experience and stories of the way that I have done things myself. and wishing that I had had this book early on. But of course, now I'm glad that I do, because it really does help me refine, do the right kind of research, ask the right questions. And of course, I also know who I can turn to, right?
Anytime.
And I appreciate that. So I want to go back to something here just very briefly. And it is, I would love it if you would share with us the difference between uniqueness and distinctive. So what is the difference, so we can all wrap our heads around that?
Sure. So again, the belief in marketing, the traditional view is that we need to do something wildly different in order to stand out in the marketplace, because it is so difficult to break through. So I understand where that thinking comes from. But as it turns out, we're actually working against the brain when we do that, because we actually are alienated by something that is bizarre or incredibly different or wildly different, or looks like it came from Mars, right? So what we really connect with is the familiar, something that we already know. Now, the criticism of the familiar is, but wait a minute, I don't want to be generic. If I'm in the bottled water category, if I put another snow-capped mountain on a bottle, then I'm going to look like everybody else. And what I say is, but wait a minute, let's just think about the power of that snow-capped mountain. That snow-capped mountain is familiar to us. It has all these positive associations. You can rattle them off right now, Jay. Like if you think about snow-capped mountain related to bottled water, what do you think?
Clean, fresh, makes me feel good, healthy.
Yeah.
Those are the things that come to my mind immediately.
100%. Pure water from the glaciers, untouched by human hands, like all of that. So it turns out that's a universal trigger. Like everybody has those same positive associations with snow-capped mountain. So why would I relinquish? Why would I cede that territory to another competitor and let them own the snow-capped mountain just because I'm afraid to do what everyone else is doing? First of all, not everybody else is doing it. There's different things. There's the springs, there's the waterfalls, there's the snow-capped mountains, there's babbling brooks, there's different versions of that. But the snow-capped mountain is really, really powerful. But what Aquafina bottled water did is they took the classic snow-capped mountain and then they rendered it in a distinctive design with a primary big peak and a little bit of a secondary peak, and it put a wonderful orange-red sunrise or sunset, I'm not sure which it is, behind the peaks. And so they kind of branded and codified that snow-capped mountain on their bottle in a very distinctive design. Is that unique? No. Is it distinctive? Hell yeah. That's distinctiveness. Big difference. Now they can ride the familiar neural pathways that are so positive, that create perceived superiority, all these positive things about snow-capped mountain, which now get co-opted and adhered to within the Aquafina bottled water brand Connectome. That snow-capped mountain now becomes part of their Connectome, and it makes it create emotional connection. And by the way, that is the definition of emotional connection. Emotional connection is when we have all these positive connections to the brand. That's emotional connection. It's not about being emotional or creating emotional stories or making people laugh or making people cry. That goes in one ear and out the other. We need to take these assets that we have as brands and businesses, and we need to codify them, turn them into sticky assets that go into memory structure. Then when the brand's name comes up, or forget the brand's name, when you're actually going to look for a bottled water, that's the brand that's going to come up.
Brilliant. Truly brilliant. This is so good. Okay, so for all of our listeners out there, if they wanted to create messages that are going to create positive associations, the very first thing they should do is, Leslie?
The very first thing they should do is try to understand their positive and negative associations from both the people who love them, the users, and the people who don't love them. You need to hear the hard truth. It may be a little painful to hear some of those negative associations. By the way, you shouldn't do it yourself. You should get someone else to do it so that those non-users don't hold back. But you need to know the truth. And that honesty is going to set you free. So that's your first step.
Okay.
What are your negative associations? Now we know what our barriers are that we need to take down, and we need to create a strategy that takes down those barriers and leans into our strengths. And then we need to codify that with triggers and distinctive brand assets that bring that to light in a very sticky way.
Brilliant. This is really so incredible. And the wealth of information that you're providing right now is I'm so grateful for you. And I know everyone that's watching and listening right now is thinking the exact same thing. And, just one other thing that I wanted to mention as we are getting close to wrapping up our conversation, and you hit on this, it's not always easy to hear the hard truth, right? We have to be in a place where we're open to it and where we realize that sometimes we just don't have the self-awareness, but we need to understand that by listening, right, by asking these types of questions, that it only helps us, right? At the end, it helps us grow. It helps us become better, to become better brands, and to be able to connect better with our customers. So when we have the information that we need, don't be afraid of it, right? Don't be afraid of it. Take the information and then begin to apply it the right way. So, Leslie, I would love it if you would give all of us a challenge. What is one thing that you would challenge our entire audience, including me? What would you challenge us to do starting today?
I would say stop trying to persuade the conscious mind. It's exhausting, it's frustrating, and it doesn't work very well. I would challenge you to try to harness people's instincts, to really listen to those notes not played. There's just a wealth of information when you start to look at brands and businesses in the instinctive mind. It turns out that those are the actual drivers of your business, the things that don't come out superficially when you kind of ask people something very top of mind. That's not where the gold lies. The gold lies much, much deeper. And I hope that this is really useful for your audience and that they'll use it to take their business and their personal lives to new heights.
Oh, I know it. I know it is, and I know it will be. It certainly has been and will continue to be for me. So my last question to you is this, and it's really a round question. So what are one or two bigger questions that you're asking yourself today? Could be about life, could be about business, but just the bigger questions that you're contemplating.
Ooh,
one or two.
That's a tough one. I think how to sort of just get more out of life in a more holistic way. Mm-hmm. I have two sons, as you mentioned. I have a husband. I have a mother, as you mentioned, who's a Holocaust survivor. And I would love to find a way to create more balance in my life like everybody else. So, looking for ways to do both of those things, to continue to achieve my goals from a business standpoint, while also, having more time for the people that I, want to spend time with.
That's a beautiful response. How are you with boundaries?
Not so good.
We'll have to talk about that one another time. So, Leslie, I want to thank you so very much for joining us today on Business Minds Coffee Chat. What a brilliant conversation. I really appreciate you allowing the conversation to go in multiple directions and really sharing of your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom that you've gained. What an eye-opener, and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, for having me. It's been just wonderful having a conversation with you. You're a wonderful interviewer, and this has really felt, like a really great conversation, more like a chat with a friend. So I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And for all of you that are watching and listening right now, I want to thank you so very much for being here, right? For tuning in and staying to the end of this conversation. That says a lot to both Leslie and me. And I do have a quick favor. Would you take just a moment to please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts? That helps us expand our reach and attract amazing guests just like Leslie Zane. And to listen to more podcasts, all you need to do is go to jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button. And my friends, until next time, keep learning, keep growing. Make sure that you go out and, matter of fact, run out and get a copy of The Power of Instinct. And please, please do yourself a favor and apply the lessons that you learn. And we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.